organizing all of that together under His power and His authority. I would suggest to you today as we get into this that it's the reformation of an Islamic kingdom. You have to understand something, that the Muslims for centuries had what was called the caliphs. And the Muslims under Turkey had what was called the Ottoman Turkish Empire. There was an empire. Just like you talk about America is a Western empire, and Britain and England was an empire, and the Babylonians and Persians were an empire. There was for 1,000 years a Turkish form of an empire that later became the Ottoman Turkish Empire that had all of southern Russia, all into Iraq and into Lebanon and Syria, all the way into northern Africa. They owned Palestine or Israel for 400 years. In 1923, Turkey dissolved the Caliph. What is happening now in the Islamic world is all Muslims, Sunnis and Shias, believe it is now time to reform the Caliph again and have an Islamic empire. And so that's what's going on behind the scenes. You will not hear this on the news, but there are secret meetings that go on with sheiks and leaders of some of the Middle Eastern countries. And Saddam Hussein felt like he was the new Nebuchadnezzar. You know, he spent $100 million rebuilding Babylon. Did you all know this? That there is a place that has the bricks of Nebuchadnezzar's picture and Saddam Hussein's picture, and he wanted to form what was called the Islamic Crescent. It would begin at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. That's why he invaded Kuwait, folks. He didn't just invade Kuwait for oil because he had plenty of oil. He invaded it to go back and start at the Persian Gulf, and Kuwait would have been annexed in, and he would have taken the Fertile Crescent all the way up into, and he had a war with Iran for 8 years to 10 years, you know that, because he wanted to take them over. So he wanted to go into Iran, into the southern Gulf, and then take all that crescent all the way up into Lebanon, over into Israel, all the way into Egypt. And what is weird is that is the very territory the Antichrist seizes. Hello. And so he thought he was going to be the new, in fact, when he would send Israel letters, like the Israeli government, he would sign them from Babylon. He would call Iraq Babylon. Isn't that interesting? And so he didn't make it there because he was not the man to do this. Now my interest is to try to trace the bloodline of this person down. Here's where you have to begin. You have to begin in the Garden of Eden. Follow me very carefully. There are two trees in the garden. One is called the tree of life. The other is called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Genesis chapter 2 verse 9. The tree of life, according to the book of Revelation, is a tree that bears 12 manner of fruit every month. Can you imagine one tree with 12 different types of fruit on it, and that it does it every month? There was something about the tree that when man would eat of it, it kept his T cells active. It kept his rejuvenated his body. It was like the eternal fountain of youth. Then there was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Everybody say two trees in the garden. One is good, one is bad. Now, after Adam partook of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and sin came in, we then come into Genesis from chapter 2 to chapter 4 verse 1, chapter 5 verse 3, and we discover that there are two sons that are born after the fall. One is Cain and the other is Abel. Cain kills Abel, as you know, and God begins to raise up Seth. From that moment on, two lineages begin to form. Here is the lineage of Adam going through Cain. First son, Cain. He had a son named Enoch. He had a son named Irad. He had a son named Methuselah. He had a son named Lamech. He had a son named Jabal and Jubal. And then he had a son by the name of Tubal-Cain. Now when you start with Adam, you'll discover from Cain's lineage, you go all the way up to that seventh man, and then it suddenly disappears. You don't hear anything else about Cain in the Bible from that moment on. So keep that lineage there and stop at number 7. Now, from Adam going through Seth's lineage, you had Adam, who had a son by the name of Seth, who had a son by the name of Enosh, who had a son by the name of Canaan, who had a son by the name of Mahalalel, who had a son by the name of Yered, who had a son by the name of Enoch. Now here's where it gets strange. When you come to the 7th lineage, I've read the names, right? You heard me read them. When you come to that 7th lineage in Cain, you don't see anything else. There's a mysterious thing that begins to happen where the Bible does not keep following that. When you come from Seth's lineage to number 7, he gets raptured. Don't miss this. Don't miss that part. Because we are from Adam 6,000 years into time. And now we're in the 7,000th year. And so what's going to happen? What's going to take place? There's going to be a rapturing of the church, don't miss this, at the time of the revealing of the Antichrist. Can you see the Cain lineage and the Seth lineage? The ungodly tree of knowledge, then the tree of life coming through another lineage. And so we get to 7 and something happens down there at the 7s. Now, that is another point. And then once we go from that point, we discover that Cain's lineage is not listed beyond Tubal-Cain. But the important thing for you to understand here is from Adam all the way to Enoch through Seth's lineage, and Adam all the way to Tubal-Cain through Cain's lineage, covers the first 1,000 years of human history. I can add up the numbers of the Bible and I can tell you the year that Enoch was translated. 988. Just short of 1,000 years. I can tell you that Adam lived, according to the genealogies, 930 years. Just 70 years short of what? 1,000 years. So this covers 1,000 years. 1,000 years is as one day. One day is as 1,000 years in God's sight. Now, let's go a step further. When John... ready for this? When John was dealing with the Antichrist, 1 John 3 and 12, he spoke of Cain, who was of that wicked one. Who was of that wicked one. These are the Antichrist scriptures, folks. And he's mentioning Cain's lineage of that wicked one. The inference there is that you could trace the Antichrist through Cain's lineage. But the problem is, the Bible stops at a certain point and doesn't tell you who's born beyond Cain. Now, obviously, Cain's lineage kept going somewhere. Okay? But where did it go and where did it end? Well, let's keep going. The second 1,000 years, of course, we have the flood of Noah. Noah went into the flood with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now what happens is we've got this lineage beginning to reform from the righteous side. Why? Because God wants to keep a lineage pure for the Messiah to come. Okay. Noah's son Ham, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham had 4 sons. The first son was Cush. He had a son by the name of Nimrod. Nimrod, according to history and the Bible, went off of the mountains. In fact, I was reading the other day Josephus, again, who's the great Jewish historian, and he said that after the flood, everybody started staying on mountains because they were afraid that God was going to send another flood and they were going to get wiped out, so they started picking these high mountains and started building on them. Well, if they'd have just remembered what God said to Noah, God said, I'm not going to destroy it by water again. You know, they had some faith. So here's what happened. By the second generation, here comes a man by the name of Nimrod. And Josephus said this is what he did. He got people to move out of the mountains into the plains of Shinar. Now watch this. The plains of Shinar are in Iraq. They run along the Euphrates River near Baghdad, all through that area. That's the plains of Shinar. How interesting, huh? Now, all surrounding Mount Ararat is very high where the ark settled. And all around Armenia and Turkey and some of those countries are mountains. When the flood waters settled, where do they go? Where does any flood water go? To the lowest spot. Guess where the lower spot is? Iraq. Plains of Shinar. History reveals, Jewish history reveals that the bones of the flood victims all settled in the plains of Shinar. So what happens was this, and I say all, I'm talking about in that part of the world. What happened was this. Nimrod said, I want to go down there in the valley, off the mountain, and I'm going to build a tower so high that God will never be able to flood it out. This is Josephus telling this. So he goes down in there and he builds this huge tower and he says it's going to reach heaven. In the process of building it, you know the